Hi friends, this is Bogdan Popescu and I'm an assistant professor at John Cabot University in Rome. I also was a lecturer at the University of Oxford and at Princeton. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about challenges and opportunities for teaching statistics. Teaching statistics is one of the most challenging but also rewarding tasks as a professor. I find extensive difficulties in teaching statistics given the heterogeneity and exposure that students may have had to statistics before. Why do teachers love teaching statistics? Teaching statistics is particularly rewarding because you see your students grow. Many of my students start from zero. They've never seen a spreadsheet in their life, and I get to see them grow from not seeing any single spreadsheet to being, to some extent, competent coders. So my challenge is really getting them to see the beauty in statistics and to feel empowered after acquiring coding skills. I also feel statistics encourages critical thinking. I guess the big lesson here is correlation does not necessarily mean causation, but also to get them to understand a variety of methodologies and tools in order to prove causation. Finally, I find it stimulating that many students get to develop their own projects. In the past, I've had students who tried to measure climate change in different countries around the world. I can remember right now a student off the top of my head who tried to evaluate the loss of glaciers or the loss in volume of glaciers in Switzerland, but also the rising temperatures in Switzerland. But I also can remember students who tried to evaluate political speeches, specifically in British parliamentary debates, and measuring the level of aggression. So seeing this amount of creativity and this amount of engagement really made me feel like my message went through, that students were inspired enough in order to pursue their own individual projects. Now, why is teaching statistics hard? Explaining concepts clearly is a hard task for a professor, in the sense that there's a different kind of journey that you have to do when you learn something on your own, and a different kind of journey when you have to explain the same concept to someone else. You have to explain it in a way that takes into account the fact that these people have never been on this path before. So this could be particularly challenging. So putting yourself in your student's shoes is important, alongside emphasizing all the steps that I go through in order to get to a final result. So I'm not skipping any single steps. I always try to emphasize the different methods by which I got to the same result. So in this way, students can really follow how we got from point A to all the way to point C. Similarly, I also try to use real-world examples. In my class, I typically use, for many lectures, I use the same data set evaluating the impact of economic development on life expectancy. So I look at this example throughout multiple lectures. So I always try to go back to the life expectancy and economic development data set, which allows students to focus on the new concepts and not so much on the data set. The second important challenge to teaching statistics is coding. I consider coding to be an essential part of understanding statistics. I typically split my classes between lectures and labs. So lectures are more about the conceptual understanding of the different statistical frameworks. The labs are more a practical application of the statistical concepts that we're learning. So in my labs, I typically teach students how to use R. The third challenge is that students can have a hard time focusing on the material, especially if it's hard. Math anxiety is a thing. People do feel that if they cannot understand something, they will abandon it right away. One solution is to really go step by step over all the items within a solution. So, as I explained before, this allows students not to feel lost. Second, I try to minimize grade anxiety. So I do that by asking students to submit the same assignment twice. So the first assignment is really working on the homework on their own. And then there is a second submission of the same assignment in which they have to implement the changes or to understand what they got wrong and work within a team in order to submit the final assignment. So in terms of reducing grade anxiety, I take the average of the two attempts. By doing so, I'm also able to stimulate community spirit and team spirit because students have to work in teams in order to submit the assignment. Finally, students also get to participate in my classes, which, as you might imagine, does stimulate some discussion and allows students to feel more engaged. The fourth challenge in teaching statistics is the assignment itself. In the era of artificial intelligence, it's becoming increasingly difficult to evaluate assignments. So this indeed was a challenge for me about a year ago when I had to consider whether I still wanted to have homework assignments or not. I decided to still have them, but they don't really allow me to distinguish between students as much anymore. What really allows me to rank students is still in-class, closed book, midterm, and final. So what ends up happening, many students get really good grades on their assignments, but it's really at the end, the midterm and the final that really make a difference. So I guess what some of you may wonder, why do we still have assignments if everybody uses AI? I still think assignments are valuable in the era of AI because understanding what to ask AI to do, it's still a skill. And being aware of the different frameworks or the different concepts in our statistics class is still important. You need to know what to ask AI in order to get some results. In addition, it can also help you to some extent troubleshoot coding assignments. So even if the learning is not quite as good as it was if you were to do the assignment on your own, there's still some learning that happens through AI. Maybe one of the biggest challenges that I had in teaching statistics is not quite a challenge right now, but at the beginning was really preparing for classes. I had never taught a statistics class from beginning to end, so preparing all the material was particularly challenging. So it was challenging because I had to make sure, so for example, for the lectures, especially given that I present them in a sequential fashion, and especially that I want to include all the mathematical steps, I had to really ensure that the sequencing was correct, the numbers are correct, so that I no longer have to worry about whether the calculation is correct, but rather I had to focus on the pedagogical aspects, like highlighting, emphasizing really how step one links to step two. In addition, I also try to have the same examples in the lectures, also in the labs. As you might imagine, that is particularly challenging and that requires a lot of planning ahead of time. Similarly, preparing assignments could be difficult because in a way the assignments have to link back to the lectures and they have to make sure that they are comprehensive in the sense of they measure or they evaluate or they help the students practice some of the skills, some of the information that they acquired through the lecture. Related to the problem of preparing for class is really the problem of planning. So after this experience of teaching statistics, I feel deeply that you have to prepare as many of the lectures and labs ahead of time, almost 6 months before you're actually given when you start teaching the class, because this allows you to pace the course adequately. It has happened to me that I ended up having a specific sequence in my head, a specific way of organizing the lecture in my head, and I ended up moving lectures around. I felt like certain lectures should go in earlier weeks and certain lectures should go in later weeks. So I would not have had this flexibility had I just prepped for the class week by week. And I feel teaching statistics and teaching computational methods classes necessitates this kind of preparation much more compared to other kinds of classes. Although I feel like even for substantive classes in political science or social sciences, teaching them, preparing them ahead of time could also be helpful. I hope you found this video helpful. I know there's a lot of videos online about specific concepts about teaching statistics, but I have not found any video where people share their experiences teaching statistics, but also students themselves learning statistics. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what have been some of your challenges learning statistics or computational methods if you're a student or learner of statistics. But also, if you're a teacher, I would be curious to hear what are the methods by which you try to reduce math anxiety and what are the creative ways to encourage learning and to get students to understand difficult materials. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to my channel and give it a thumbs up. I'll keep posting educational materials about my life as an academic and also tips and advice on how to study and how to be more productive with your time. Thank you and see you in the next video.